Hey guys, welcome back to Wentworth Live and welcome to the start of the Season 1 episode reviews. I have been so excited to start these. Now, as some of you will know, I started this YouTube channel doing Wentworth episode reviews, but I started from around the Season 6 mark. So now I thought is the right time and go back and start from the very beginning. Now, my episode reviews in the past, they have been quite lengthy, sometimes up to an hour long, but what I'm going to do going forward is I'm going to try and keep these episode reviews down to at least under 20 to 25 minutes just per episode. It just makes it easier if some of you, you've missed a few videos and you need to go back and binge and catch up on. It just makes things a little bit easier and, better, more time managed. So without further ado, let's get this show on the road. Wentworth Season 1, Episode 1. No place like home. Now, this is where it all begins, all of the heartache and all of the anarchy. We are introduced to all of our favorite characters, but first things first, B. Smith. Now, B arrives in the back of a van with another prisoner who is asking, "What's your name?" And B is like, B Smith. And this other prisoner, she's like, "Suckle up, B Smith." We are then introduced to a male prison officer who jumps in the back of this van, and this nameless prisoner, she decides to give this guy a gobby for a packet of smokes in front of B Smith. Now, you learn pretty fast in this very first episode that this show is going to pull no punches. B is inducted by Mr. Jackson, but B, she starts to freak out when she says that she needs to call her daughter Debbie, and when B tries to make a run for it out of that induction room, Will ends up calling for help and B ends up getting drugged to try and calm her down. Well, it's actually quite a big moment considering that it's B who ends up fighting against drugs as the seasons go on, but let's not jump that far ahead just yet. Let's talk about a moment in this episode where B meets Frankie for the first time. Oh god. When I first saw this episode, I was watching it with my mother. So B meets Frankie for the very first time while Frankie is getting busy with Kim in B's bed. Oh god, I just wanted the floor to swallow me up when I was watching this with my mother. I was like, oh, cup of tea anyone, cup of tea? Also, when I was first watching this episode, I was keeping a very keen eye out to see who was the current top dog. And I think at first I assumed that it was Frankie because Frankie, she seemed so confident and the women seemed to follow her, and that is until we get introduced to Jacs. But before I do get to Jacs, let's talk about Doreen and Kaya and Liz. So Liz is a peer worker who is doing everything that she can to look out for the women, which almost sounds like something a good top dog would do, but Liz, she's a softie and a big massive sweetheart, and she's like kind of the mum of the unit. When we meet Doreen, she's holding a little girl called Kaya. Now, I was a little bit confused when I first saw this. I mean, I don't know much about Australian prisons, but I wasn't aware that inmates were allowed to have like children with them inside prison. Now, I know that there are special, areas in the prison, like maternity areas for children, where, they have to stay in those areas because those areas are safe. But Doreen, she's walking around the whole prison with Kaya, which I just found a little bit strange. Either way, Kaya is absolutely adorable, and we learn in this episode that Doreen will pretty much do anything that Frankie tells her. Now, Frankie is a little bit of a bitch to be in this first episode, but I think this is Frankie showing B the new girl who's in charge. But I did really feel for B when Frankie, she wouldn't let B use the phones to call her daughter. And by the way, my name is actually used in this very first episode. So Frankie, she forces B to go and meet a guy called CRAIGz who is going to pass some drugs to her. Now, I don't think Frankie actually explains to B how this transaction is going to happen, but when B goes to the visitor's room and meets this CRAIGz, he goes to kiss her, but B, she pulls away. Now, CRAIGz is not happy and tells B to sit the fuck down, and he explains to her that in half an hour, they're gonna try that again. And this is when he shows B that he has some drugs in like a red container in his mouth. That's not gonna taste very nice. So half an hour passes and then Craig goes in for the kill, and he literally gives B the deepest, wettest kiss and passes this thing into B's mouth, and it's just so gross. Now, I was actually on the edge of my seat when B was being like strip searched, and then Meg Jackson comes out into the yard, you know, the governor. She was forcing B to open her mouth really, really wide and stretch it open, and my heart was pounding for B's on B's behalf. But it turns out that B has actually swallowed this thing. So Frankie takes B to the toilets, and this is when we are first introduced to Boomer, who is taking a dump. B then throws up the drugs, but then Meg Jackson, she's there and she catches B red-handed. B does not have a great start in prison. Let's talk about Governor Meg Jackson. I mean, my first impressions is that she seems like a very tough governor who is clearly having issues with trying to control the drug problem in the prison. Now, she is married to Officer Will Jackson, and we learn that Will wants to try and make babies. There is also Mr. Fletcher, otherwise known as Fletch, who ends up walking in on Will and Meg, hugging and having a little bit of a kiss. And Fletch ends up telling Meg that it's pretty inappropriate behaviour for the governor. And Meg just turns around and tells him, well, if you had knocked Mr. Fletcher, you could have saved yourself the embarrassment. And I was like, ooh, she's a sassy one. I don't really have any particular opinions on Meg because, as we all know, she ends up brown bread by the end of this episode, but we'll get there in just a moment. Vera is the deputy governor of Wentworth, and we learn that she has been stuck as deputy governor for quite some time. In Meg Jackson's words, Vera has watched a parade of governors walk through that door. Vera seems like a really kind-hearted person in this first episode. She seems sweet, and I think compared to the rest of the officers, maybe Mr. Jackson aside, Vera would be the one that I would want to go to if I needed help with anything. Let's not forget the #1 rule, never press that panic button. Let's talk about Jacs Holt, the real top dog of Wentworth. Now, she's been slotted for a little while, and I think it turns out that Frankie had set her up, so Jax is out for revenge. There is an incredible scene when Jax literally taunts and tries to bully B in the dining room while B is making a cup of tea for Jax, and we get to see little bits and bobs of flashbacks to B's husband being physically abusive to her. We then see B trying to kill her husband by dragging him into the garage and tying him to the car and turning on the ignition, trying to kill him basically, but making it look like suicide. But Debbie arrives and she opens the door, and they end up ringing an ambulance, who notice that something is not quite right with this situation. It's then not long before B is arrested, and this is why she's now in Wentworth. At the same time, we see some of these flashbacks. B stands up to Jax in front of everyone in the dining room, telling Jax what she's in for and for her to get her own tea. You can tell that this really annoys Jax, and Frankie, she can't resist having a few digs and shouting abuse at Jax. Now, in this first episode, we are introduced to Wentworth's first ever riot, with many more to come. Frankie's crew against Jax's crew. This is where a huge fight erupts in the yard, and at one point there's even like an inmate being shivved in the guts over and over again, and it's pretty gruesome. A chain of events then begin, where Jax leaves the yard and goes to her cell, but Frankie follows her while holding a shiv, and some of Jax's crew is there. They grab Frankie. Jax then grabs the shiv and starts to slice off Frankie's tattoos, starting with her boob. Now, thank God Boomer arrived on the scene and saved Frankie. B's time in Wentworth just gets worse and worse because B, she's looking after Kaya while all the alarms are going off in the middle of this riot, and when B leaves Kaya for just a moment to grab Kaya's teddy bear, Kaya walks off and disappears, and B runs down the corridors looking for her. Now, I'm not gonna lie, my heart was pounding when I first saw this scene. I honestly thought something really bad was about to happen to this little girl. Turns out that it's Meg Jackson who ended up getting it. I mean, B, she ends up falling over Meg's dead body, and Meg, she's been stabbed. Now, B has got blood all over her, and it's now looking like that it was B who killed Meg. The officers arrive, and Will, he's there, and he's screaming and crying because it's his wife, you know, lying dead on the ground. He even looks up at B thinking like, you know, shit, you've done this. Why did you kill my wife? Now, when I first saw this episode, I was pretty blown away. So much happens. You really get to learn just how brutal prison life can be. And I think that's why this show just works, because we honestly do see this first episode through B's eyes. The episode ends when Meg's body is found, and we are left wondering what the hell is gonna happen next. Now, we've all seen Wentworth. We've seen Wentworth from start to finish, so we know what's to come. But my final thoughts on season 1, episode 1 is it's hardcore, it's gritty, parts are genuinely terrifying, and I love the characters. I think the fact that they killed off the governor in the very first episode just shows how serious this show is going to get. No one is safe. Okay, well, that is the end of my first episode review. Get ready for next week's review, season 1, episode 2, Fly Me Away. I really hope you've enjoyed this review just as much as I've enjoyed making it. It's so good to be back doing some episode reviews again. If you did enjoy this video, then please share it with your Wentworth buddies and let me know in the comments box below what was your very first impressions of Wentworth after you had seen this first episode for the very first time. I will be really interested to hear your views. Okay guys, well, thank you all for watching today's video. Make sure you smash that subscribe button, stay safe out there, and I'll see you all again very soon.